Hello, welcome to video. So this will be kind of an interesting video. Um, so my previous video, I did some examining of that, some of the information I presented, and I realized something that doesn't seem right. And I want to share with you some of those concerns I have. But first of all, let's go to Matthew 10:23. When they, but whenever they persecute you in one city, flee to the next. For to the city, you will not finish going through the cities of Israel until the Son of Man comes. Now think about it. Now we know that Peter was from Galilee, right? If you are given this mission and you want to cover through all the cities of Israel, you got to coordinate with the other apostles. And remember, they went in pairs, okay? You have to coordinate which area has been covered, so you're not covering the same areas, that sort of thing. It only makes sense for Peter to move his residency from Galilee to Jerusalem to fulfill this mission. Okay? Makes sense? Are you with me so far? And then if we go to 1 Peter, verse 12 to 13, by Silvanus, a faithful brother unto you, as I suppose, have I written briefly, exhorting and testifying how this is the true grace of God wherein you stand. This is where there's a major translation problem here. When I look at 1 Peter 5:13, and you'll see the connection of all this in a little bit, okay? It's translated as she, but when you look at the actual Greek word, it's meaning the definitive article. Makes no sense to translate as she, when obviously this is referring to the definitive article of Silvanus. It's Silvanus that was greeting them in Babylon. It does not make sense to translate this as she or church in a lot of English translations. It doesn't make sense. Now, I'm not a Greek scholar, okay? Disclaimer, okay? But this does not make sense. Why you would translate this Greek word that means this to she, when Silvanus is a male, obviously. So it appears to me that it's Silvanus that greets them in Babylon, who lived in Babylon. Now, why would Peter write these things, have these things written? It's for remember the very first verse, he told them, by churches you're scattered, you're aliens are scattered. That was the side of the way to tell the Jews who came to Christ in those churches, it's time to go for your gathering. Okay? Remember, they were ready to go for their gathering. They were like a tightly loaded spring. So, also, just suggest that Silvanus, I regard him through a few words I have written, it suggests that Silvanus was the one who wrote 1 Peter, the one who wrote it for Peter. Remember, Peter was not educated, he did not know Greek, so Silvanus would have known Greek to be able to write it for him. Okay? Alrighty. So anyway, so he would have been the one in Babylon, which would have hinted to them, this is where you need to go for your gathering. Okay? Or on the way to the gathering anyway. And Mark, the son of me. This heavily suggests that this is his biological son. Now the argument goes, you go back to Acts 12, okay? Right here. Now when you first read this, you're going to think, oh, this is not Peter's house. This is the house of Mary. Okay? You all know who the husband is, right? Blank. The mother of John, who is called Mark. Again, this is the same, most likely the same Mark that's talked about here. Okay? It's the same Greek word there anyway. Okay? But when you look at the situation, this is where it gets interesting. The guards were looking for him. Peter knew that. Okay? And he knocked at the door. Servant girl named Rhoda came to, okay, a servant girl, okay. She recognized Peter's voice, so she had known his voice. So he had been there before, Okay, keep in mind. Okay, because of her joy, she did not open the gate. Okay, she obviously being very cautious here, but ran in and announced that Peter was standing in front of the gate. They said to her, "You are out of your mind," but she kept insisting that it's so. He kept saying it is an angel. Now think about it. If this is really Peter's house, they're thinking he's not going to go there. Okay? If you're Luke writing this, you're not going to disclose that this is Peter's house, if it is his house. Okay? But Peter continued knocking, and they opened the door and saw him and were amazed. But motioning with his hand to be silent, he described to them how the Lord led him out of prison, and he said, report these things to James and brethren. And that's what would have been happening. That's why Peter would have moved to Jerusalem. But that's where they gather reports and you know, again, they're fulfilling the mission in Matthew 10:23. Okay, so it just makes sense that Peter would have moved to Jerusalem. So the point I'm trying to bring up with this, that's the continued pattern here. Then he left and went to another place. He could not stay at his home. Okay. Now when day came, you know, the next day, there was no small disturbance among the soldiers as to what could come of Peter. So they're going to go look for him in his house, right? When Herod had searched for him and not found him, he examined the guard in order they be led away to execution. So this suggests that they went to that house, and Peter had already left. That would have been his house. Okay? So that would mean that would have been his wife, another Mary, a very common name, mother of John, who's also called Mark. Remember, he referred to him as his son, my son. Okay? If this is a spiritual son, you don't refer him to as my son. Okay? You refer to him as a son. Okay, just some thoughts on that, okay? But this is very possible that this was actually his house and that Luke was protecting Peter by just referring, now again, Mary, the name Mary is a very common name, okay? So by saying he went to the house of Mary, you know it's Mary, right? Instead of identifying the husband, okay, which is when Peter, okay, it's a way to protect Peter. This is a very really likely scenario. That's what's really going on here, okay. So anyway, I'm gonna have to do a little more research on the servant girl, the details of that. But yeah, she recognized Peter's voice. Okay, so he hadn't been there before, right? So anyway, but she had joy, so she had to know him personally. And it also meant joy that if Peter had been gone, then her job would have been probably on the line. You know, just a thought. Anyway. So it just makes sense that he would go straight to his home. And so, these are just some thoughts. But anyway, yeah, so going back to this here, I think is just a bad translation. When you look at the Greek, it makes no sense to translate a church or she. When you look at the actual Greek word, again, I am not a Bible scholar, but just looking at this, I'm just scratching my head like, huh? So it would have been Sylvanus that was in Babylon, and they were to meet up with Sylvanus. And again, this does not change the gathering. If you go to, let's see here, Google Earth. That does not change their gathering. Let me get to you what I'm mean by that. So if you're gonna have a gathering and you gotta have think through the logistics, this is it. I mean, this again, this was considered their safe place, Egypt. Go to Matthew chapter 2, where they brought Jesus to Egypt as a baby, when he was a baby. This was considered their safe place. And if you're going to have a gathering, this would be the place to go. You have the multiple water channels, Fortress of Babylon, okay? So it's very likely that Peter moved from Galilee to Jerusalem to fulfill that mission. Remember, they had to meet up and go make sure they're not duplicating areas where they're sharing the gospel, trying to bind and loosen the house of Israel. It just makes sense he would move to Jerusalem. And then the gathering would have taken place towards here on the way to Petra. Okay? So it changes the detail a little bit, but not much. So it would have been Sylvania that would have been in Babylon. And according to Eusebius, now again, he's not a reliable source. Mark was in Alexandria. Okay? So it makes sense that the 5 churches that Peter wrote to would have gone to greet Mark, and then to Fortress Babylon. Okay, so that would have been his son. I believe it was biological son. Okay, but again, I think what's going on here, when Luke wrote that, he was trying to protect Peter's home, protect the identity of his home. He was in a position where the guards were looking for him. So anyway, very real possibility. That is his wife's name. Again, very common name. And that is his biological son. And so by Luke writing this the way he did, he was actually protecting Peter here, his home. And so anyway, just some thoughts. Well, thank you very much for watching, and yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. So anyway, yeah, it's interesting in the effort of Luke trying to protect Peter. If it naturally fools the reader when they first read this, and you're not thinking through the situation, the possible scenarios. They're just going to naturally assume this is just some random Mary, who's mother of John Mark. Well, that can't be Peter's wife, otherwise Luke would have said the house of Peter. Why didn't you just say house of Peter? It's because the situation where Luke was trying to protect Peter, and he did not want to write down house of Peter. And so Luke, knowing people reading this media in their day, who knew Peter and his wife's name and his son's name would know this was obviously Peter's house, and Luke just tried to protect Peter. Okay, but only the people who intimately knew him. Okay, so obviously the guards, they probably didn't know, they've been looking for Peter at this house. So again, Luke was trying to provide a layer of protection here. Yeah. So anyway. All right. Well, thank you very much for watching, and have a great day.